or to give the announcement that everyone's been talking about in the news today. That is the government's reforms to NHS system architecture. But I do want to address this leadership speculation up front, because I know there is concern about how long the man in the top job has left. So let me reassure everyone, I'm doing everything I can to persuade Jim Mackey to stick around for as long as possible. And it is a relief, actually, but genuinely great to be here with all of you today. And I'm really grateful, Daniel, for the leadership that you and NHS providers is showing at such a challenging time. But before I get into the challenges, let me just start with the positives. Because right now, we're achieving things in the NHS we've not seen for a long, long time. And I know it's not been easy. I've made considerable demands on you, and will continue to do so. But you've shown over the last year or so that while the NHS was broken, it wasn't beaten. You've provided 5 million more elective appointments, 135,000 more cancer diagnoses within the 28-day target, and cut waiting lists by over 200,000. Ambulance response times and 12-hour waits in A&E are down. There are 2,500 more GPs. In fact, we now have the highest number of GPs on record. You've opened over 100 community diagnostic centres at evenings and weekends, new surgical hubs to bust the backlog, the extra doctors, nurses and mental health staff we need to treat patients on time. And together we've built the 10-year plan for health to create the truly modern health service that we're all crying out for. These are the green shoots of recovery that are beginning to renew confidence and restore faith in our National Health Service for both patients and for our staff. Our investment and modernisation are paying off. And with it, ambition and optimism are returning. It's why I can come here today and say with credibility that we can still cut waiting times to 18 weeks by the end of this Parliament, something few thought possible when we made the commitment in opposition. And while we can do it, and we can do it, while delivering year-on-year improvements to urgent and emergency care, so we can get back to seeing people within 4 hours, and while rebuilding general practice so that patients can get an appointment with their doctor when they need one. So I want to begin by saying to all of you, genuinely, thank you. There's sometimes a perception out there that I'm going to have to really battle this system and all of you to modernise, and it is such a misrepresentation of the leaders I work with. NHS leaders and frontline staff are not only chomping at the bit for change, you're the ones showing the world that it can be delivered. There's a real can-do culture back in the NHS. But, and it's a big but, there is also a great deal of jeopardy out there, from economic constraints, winter pressures, industrial action, and the political forces willing us all to fail. So there's a lot of pressure on our shoulders too, because we all know how important the NHS is to our country, how central it is to the lives of every family in this land, and how strongly we believe in the values that have underpinned it since 1948, values that are becoming increasingly contested. So it's important, I think, for us to keep in mind the consequences if we get this wrong. Millions are counting on us, and there's much, much more to do. So this isn't the moment to ease off the gas. This is the moment to push our foot harder on the accelerator. One reason why we see renewed confidence is the rigid focus you've brought to reducing waste and increasing productivity while improving services at the same time. In fact, reducing waste and increasing productivity are essential to improving patient services and staff experience. This government is investing an extra £26 billion in the NHS this year. We continue to be relative winners of budgets and spending reviews, although you and I know what the word relative means, which is why I'm always relatively happy at how we do at budget time. And we owe it to patients, to staff and to taxpayers to make sure that every penny that's going into this service is money well spent. That's why I'm really proud that for the first time in years, the NHS is in balance 7 months into the financial year. It's not going to be easy to stay on track for the rest of this year, especially with the double whammy of strikes and winter to come. But breaking even is a huge shift from the £6.6 billion deficit we were looking at. There are people out there saying that universal healthcare, free at the point of need, is no longer affordable or possible. And everyone in this room and beyond is proving them wrong. So this isn't just a technocratic accounting triumph. It is the foundation of everything else, because it's ultimately what will allow us to invest again in staff, technology and services, all of which add up to better patient experience. It also gives me, but all of us, credibility with the Chancellor. The government inherited public finances with a £22 billion black hole, and it won't have escaped your notice that the public finances and the wider economy are still under serious strain. So there is no money to waste. And I think that it's really important that we accept with some humility that one of the reasons the Chancellor's having to make some unpopular choices is to protect investment in the NHS. This government will always put our public services and our NHS first. But the investment Labour is making in the NHS also comes with a moral duty for us as NHS leaders, because every penny that goes into treating the sickness in our society is a penny that could have been spent on tackling the wider social determinants of health, much of which sits outside the NHS, on prevention rather than cure. Of course, when I say savings, it sounds very benign. In reality, I do want to take this opportunity to acknowledge that this has been particularly hard for ICBs. I've asked a lot of you this year. Last year I said that ICBs will have a more focused purpose as strategic commissioners. They're the drivers of the transformation from a national health service to a neighbourhood health service and a preventative health service. Given that focus brief, we're asking ICBs to downsize significantly. Having overseen redundancies in organisations I've worked in previously, I want you to know I do not take this lightly. I know this will have been weighing heavily on all of you and the people who work for you. And I certainly don't want ICB leaders to take the flak for decisions and timetables on headcount that are ultimately my responsibility. I'm very alive to the uncertainty that's hung over staff for far too long. And I don't mind saying it's made me uncomfortable, as it should, because I know we're not just talking about jobs, we're talking about people's livelihoods. And again, that is my responsibility, not yours. I want to be honest with you and through you to your staff that I have not resolved this quickly enough. But this is worth doing, and we can now bring certainty to people. From today, I'm giving ICBs the go-ahead and the funding for the voluntary redundancy programmes that staff have been waiting for. This will see overall headcount cut by 50%, which will particularly, not exclusively, but particularly affect roles in corporate services, communications and administration. Alongside this, we're moving ahead with the abolition of NHS England and will complete it to the timetable the Prime Minister announced in March. Headcount across my department and NHS England will also be halved, returning to the size we had in 2010, when the NHS delivered the shortest waiting times and highest patient satisfaction in history. This move will free up more than £1 billion a year, which will be reinvested in frontline care. To anyone listening at home, and who knows, someone might be listening at home, I want to reassure you that our investment is not simply pouring more water into a leaky bucket. We're plugging the holes, cutting out the waste and rebuilding our National Health Service. And to those of you here today, and hopefully you're listening, we aren't simply changing staff numbers. We are ending the constant assurance, ad hoc demands, and micromanagement that you've been subjected to. The centre will instead enable you to focus on improving services for patients, a new department that empowers rather than suffocates NHS leaders and frontline staff. And I have to say, the way in which leaders across the service are responding to the scale of the challenge I've placed on you has been extremely genuinely impressive. The energy, determination, and sense of shared responsibility to succeed is remarkable and makes me very proud to lead this service. Going into this winter, we're seeing that same energy and determination as we do everything we can to prepare. You're freeing up more beds. We've seen an uptick in flu jabs among staff and the public. We've stress-tested plans much earlier. We're investing in new ambulances, building new urgent treatment centres, and introducing new mental health crisis centres. Online access to GP practices should stem the tide of the 4 million patients who go to A&E each year because they can't get through to their local surgery. So thank you to all of those GPs who have successfully introduced this new system. You'll be crucial in unclogging emergency departments, freeing up beds and saving lives this winter. And on the social care side, we're working more closely with local authorities to ensure people get the care and support they need at home rather than languishing in hospital beds. But we know that the NHS is already running hot. A&E and ambulance demand is already higher than it was in 2024. Flu is coming earlier, and there is a particularly nasty strain this season. Those are the challenges we have to rise to. For many patients who come through our doors this winter, it will be the one time in the entire year when they experience the NHS. What impression do we want them to leave with? Do we want to be just about managing? That can't be our benchmark. We can't accept the winter crisis as an annual event like the John Lewis Christmas ad. We have to improve year on year. And of course, with all these challenges, the last thing patients need this winter is strike action by the BMA. I was really proud of the way that NHS leaders and frontline staff pulled together to get through the last round of resident doctor strikes. We saw an additional 11,000 procedures going in the 2024 walkout. We managed to keep the costs of industrial action down to the tune of £100 million less than the previous round. And despite the busiest July on record for A&E, this was the highest proportion of patients seen within 4 hours in 4 years. I think that is a considerable achievement. And I want all of you to know that it wasn't lost on me how hard you all worked to keep the show on the road. But the truth is that strikes do have unavoidable and serious consequences, particularly when they're called during winter. That is why I made a comprehensive offer to the BMA last week in a final attempt to prevent strike action. Coming on top of a 28.9% pay rise, which they've already received from this government, I would have thought that our offer to go even further with extra jobs, prioritisation and money back in their pockets would have demonstrated how serious this government is about improving resident doctors' lives and career prospects. Yet the BMA rejected the offer out of hand, refusing to even put it to their members. If strikes do go ahead, at a cost of around £240 million, we will not be able to afford the same offer again. So my message to the BMA is simple. Postpone the strikes, trust your members, and give resident doctors a say. Patients, doctors, and the wider NHS staff all lose if strikes go ahead. And there is still time for everyone to win. That brings me to a broader point about choices and trade-offs. When we pull together and when we mobilise behind the ideas in the 10-year plan, we can deliver year-on-year improvement, change and transformation that gets the NHS back on its feet and fit for the future. When parts of our team fail to recognise that we can't solve everything for everyone, everywhere, all at once, that's when we run into difficulties. That's what makes our collective job much harder. I know I'm preaching to the choir in this room because as leaders, there are choices and trade-offs that you face every day. And it's really important that we continue to work together to face those choices and trade-offs in an honest way. Because the progress of the last 18 months tells a bigger story. One of a service beginning to believe in itself again. That's quite something, given the horrendous state of neglect the NHS was in after 14 years of underinvestment and mismanagement. And we have to be honest that some of what we're doing has never been tried before. Success won't happen overnight. I, will make some mistakes along the way. That is all part of learning and improving. But together, we've begun restoring confidence. We've built strong foundations for real improvements. We've moved from barely scraping by to having real hope and big ambitions. I said there'd be fewer targets and less bureaucracy, and there are. I said there'd be no more short-termism, and we now have multi-year funding settlements to give you the certainty you need. I said the centre would be smaller, and it will be. I said that power would be handed back to patients, professionals and providers, and it is being. All of this is why we're today in a position to declare that the NHS is on the road to recovery. And at the heart of that revival is our 10-year plan for health. It sets out how we'll transform the service of today into an NHS fit for the future. Our 3 big shifts will create a new model of care that not only catches up with the rest of the pack, but leads the world. The plan breaks with the fiction that you can run a health service of 1.5 million staff who deliver 600 million patient interactions every single day from an office building in Whitehall. The new care model is backed by a new operating model, anchored in clear and consistent principles. Power and resources should flow to local providers, frontline staff, and ultimately be placed in the hands of patients. Autonomy should be earned by meeting public expectations, delivering high-quality care with excellent financial oversight through world-class leadership. Good performance should be incentivised and rewarded. Poor performance should be held rigorously to account. And transparency and choice are not essentials. They are essentials, not nice to have. That's what lay behind our decision to publish new NHS league tables. I know there was a concern when I announced them last year that this would be about naming and shaming and good old-fashioned manager bashing. I hope you can see now that this is actually about confronting the challenges we all face with grown-up honesty. I was delighted, for example, with the way the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in King's Lynn, a hospital which is literally being propped up on stilts, responded to being bottom of the table. Let me just share with you what the Executive Managing Director, Chris Bound, said. He said, and I quote, "The issues about our waiting times in our emergency department being too long, our waiting times for cancer care and elective care being too long, and our financial situation are not attributed directly to the state of the building. There are things we must do within this building to improve the experience of patients and staff." Now, the reason I highlight that as an example is he could easily have said, "Oh, it's all because my hospital's falling down." And I know he could have said that because I recall offering that defence myself on BBC local radio in his part of the world earlier that day. And in contrast to what I said, what Chris did was offer the warts and all honesty that is the first step on the road to recovery. Not making excuses and covering backsides, but actually taking responsibility and showing a determination to improve even when factors are stacked against you. That is how we turn the NHS around. But even as we let go of the top-down approach of the past, we're not abandoning trusts to their fate. Those at the bottom of the tables will receive more support. At the other end, good performance will be incentivised and rewarded. This new culture of openness drives change and builds confidence that the NHS can learn and improve, which is crucial to restoring people's faith in the NHS itself. And today I want to talk about the next steps we're taking on our new operating model. The first step is a real empowerment of primary care and general practice. Already, the hard work and innovation of GPs across the country are helping to renew public confidence in the NHS as the reversal of a decade of declining patient satisfaction shows. And I know it's not easy. The demands of a 21st century population, the demands of ageing, and rising health need have led to unsustainable workloads. We've already halved the number of targets in the GP contract and are investing an extra £1.1 billion. But the bright future that general practice deserves will only come through fundamental modernisation. That's why we're introducing 2 new neighbourhood contracts. A single neighbourhood provider contract for the delivery of enhanced services for patients through expert multidisciplinary teams. and a multi-neighbourhood provider contract to lead the neighbourhood health service at scale. This is taking the best of the NHS to the rest of the NHS, learning from some of the trailblazing GP federations already doing this. Pooling resources and expertise will deliver better services over larger areas, like frailty or end-of-life care, and deliver a more efficient back office, so more of GP's time is spent with patients. And as neighbourhood health services reduce demand on acutes, new financial flows will see savings return to them, helping to accelerate the left shift. I should say at this point, just for the avoidance of doubt, because there might be more media attention on this speech than usual, when I say left shift, it's not because I'm quotes on manoeuvres. Our second step reinvents the NHS Foundation Trust model for modern times. Today we're launching a new generation of foundation trusts called Advanced Foundation Trusts. They will be the front runners towards a more autonomous, accountable and integrated NHS. And I can announce that 8 trusts are in the running for this new status. They come from across the country, from Dorset to Northumbria, and they are a mix of acute, mental health and community trusts. They represent both the best of our NHS and the diversity of our NHS. Those who are successful will have demonstrated that they're delivering on the public's priorities: high quality care for patients, value for money and progress on the left shift. They'll be the kind of providers who don't need the centre breathing down their neck or trying to micromanage their finances. And they will benefit from real and immediate freedoms, including the ability to reinvest surpluses accumulated last year in future capital projects, more operational autonomy and fewer ad hoc requests from the centre. We'll continue to open new freedoms and deliver greater autonomy for advanced foundation trusts in the coming years. And in 10 years' time, we want every trust to have achieved that status. Our third step is the creation of integrated healthcare organisations, or IHOs. Advanced Foundation Trusts will be among the first to take on IHO contracts and hold the whole health budget for a defined population. I've heard from so many leaders about how hard it can be to invest in prevention because the savings fall in another part of the system. IHOs will reverse this disincentive. If it makes sense to invest in community care to prevent unnecessary hospital admissions, they'll be rewarded for doing just that. Any trust can become one, not just the big acutes. And so there is no reason, by the way, they couldn't be led by primary care professionals. In fact, one of the 2 trusts currently under consideration for IHO status is a community trust. And that diversity will continue. If a nurse is best placed to lead a community service, a GP best placed to lead a hospital, or an acute trust best placed to lead neighbourhood health services, well then that's what they'll do. Because what matters is what delivers for patients. None of this is simply a renaming exercise. However technocratic it might sometimes appear, or even feel, good system architecture is how we bring to life the vision and ambition in the 10-year plan. I'm offering that as a reminder to myself as much as anyone else. We're breaking the NHS out of its short-term cycles, of annual plans, of emergency bungs, of rolling crises, complex rules, unnecessary targets. Instead, our approach is and will be, if you deliver for patients, if you manage your finances well, if you innovate, then you will have the space to lead. Because plans don't deliver change, people do. And this conference is a reminder that confidence comes from good leadership, and that good leadership in the NHS has never mattered more. Great NHS leaders listen to staff and patients and turn that listening into action. They don't wait for permission to do the right thing. They don't require a diktat from NHS England. Their attitude says, we can do better, and we will. The difference now is that the system will support you to unleash your entrepreneurialism, creativity and innovation. All of this adds up to a very different kind of NHS. It marks a fundamental shift from command and control to collaboration and confidence. And when people feel they are part of a system that learns, listens and leads, confidence returns. And confidence is everything. The NHS was built on it. The confidence of a nation that believed in universal healthcare free at the point of use. The confidence of staff who knew they were part of something bigger than themselves. What we're doing together is restoring that confidence. The coming years won't be a walk in the park. There are no magic wands, no silver bullets. Keeping up momentum will require all of the energy and grit and initiative that's got us heading in the right direction. We need to up our elective activity to hit the ambitious targets the Prime Minister set us, to get people seen as quickly as possible in urgent and emergency care, and to keep improving access to GPs. And we need to maintain our firm grip on the finances. But for the first time in years, the NHS can look forward with confidence rather than back in frustration, because we've got a plan that's not just ambitious and realistic, we've got a plan that is working. And that is why the NHS is on the road to recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary of State. Thank you very much for your keynote speech. Now, I know you said you're not on manoeuvres, but you know that I'm going to ask you about that. Sir Keir Starmer's vowed to fight any plots to oust him. Will you be fighting alongside him?
Yes. I mean, the bizarre thing about some juvenile briefing overnight is that it's people in Number 10 who've said the Prime Minister is fighting for his job. Now, I don't think that's, firstly, a helpful or constructive thing to say. I also don't think it's true. What I think he is doing is fighting to try and turn the country around from the enormous mess that we've inherited on so many fronts.
In 2024, and tell me if it's incorrect, there was an interview which you were unequivocal about your desire to be Prime Minister one day. Is that true?
I've got a harder job already, so I'm quite enjoying doing this one. Thank you very much. And I'm definitely not going to say anything today that adds to the silly season going on down south.
OK, just final question on the manoeuvres that aren't. This morning on Sky News, you said that you felt that you'd been kneecapped by Downing Street in terms of the briefing. I
think I said it was the most unwarranted attack on a faithful since Joe Marler was banished in the Traitors final. And I think whoever's been briefing this should spend a little less time watching Celebrity Traitors and a bit more time watching Country File.
OK, right, on to the NHS. Realistically, what can we expect from the upcoming budget as regards the NHS?
So I think that, you'd struggle to move for, to avoid the speculation about the budget and the expectation management, I think, that the Chancellor has been sensibly doing. This is going to be a challenging budget. We can see the economic backdrop and we can see the pressures in the public finances. I think we can be sure of a couple of things. The first is the Chancellor has been very clear that this is a budget to protect NHS investment. So I think we can go into the budget confident that what we were allocated at the spending review is protected. If she can go further, especially on things like capital, I'm sure she will. But what she has given us, over and above everything else, in terms of decisions she's already made, has been the NHS at the top of the tree in terms of her priorities. And also, and perhaps arguably even more valuable than the increases we've had in our budgets, it's that certainty over a kind of spending review period, over a 3-year period. Because if we are asking you to change, to drive transformation, and to do so at the same time as driving year-on-year improvements in the service, we have to give you that certainty and stability and the tools to do the job. And so knowing what your outlook looks like for the next few years doesn't make the hard choices go away. It doesn't make any of it easy, but it does mean that you can plan with certainty and break out of the short-termism. And I think that's probably the most valuable thing the Chancellor has done for us, and that's why I can sort of go confidently into the budget, as the Health and Social Care Secretary, if anxious about the state of the economy and the state of the public finances.
OK, we're going to open up to the floor now and take some questions. Raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question down at the front.
Secretary of State, thank you very much. Terence Stevenson, Chair of NHS Providers. I want to ask you about workforce, but not the usual about we want more staff. We've heard a lot over the last 2 days about how AI might free NHS staff more time to be clinically in contact with patients. but also how it might mean we lose staff. We don't need admin staff. And as a Labour Secretary, I'm interested in your view on that. You were talking earlier about reduction in headcount at ICBs, a further reduction in headcount in the NHS as a result of AI. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think a Labour government has both a historic responsibility, but are also uniquely placed in British politics to ensure that the transition from the world we live in today to the world that is being created for us in the biggest and fastest industrial revolution the world has ever seen is one that is a just transition that protects the interest of labour with a small l, working people. And that's because from the very inception of our party, we were created by the trade union movement to serve the interests of labour against the interests of capital. And so whether it's conventional capital or automated capital, it's our historic responsibility to make sure that we defend opportunities and security that means that people can have a good quality of life no matter who they are, what their background or what it is that they do. And so it's our responsibility to help people to transition from the sorts of jobs and functions they're performing now to the jobs we will need them to do in the future. And yes, there are certain functions that will be automated, and I think there is a liberating potential of technology for staff and for patients, whether it's kind of stripping out some of the tedious form filling that staff always frustrated by, or whether it's the ease, convenience, the choice and control that can come to the palm of patients' hands. I think the thing that maybe makes our lives a bit easier in this space, maybe compared to other sectors, is that for all of the exciting AI, genomics, machine learning, big data, health and social care will always fundamentally be people-based services. And so I think the question for us is, how do we get the most out of people? Where do people add the most value? And how do we make sure that people whose jobs might be dislocated in the not too distant future can be retrained, reskilled and redeployed into areas where they can make an enormous difference?
Take a question from Slido. Time is running out rapidly. In another life, would you ever consider applying to be an NHS Trust Chief Executive?
If there's a job more difficult than mine, no. In all seriousness, and I hope people took from what I said the sincerity of it, and not just Trust Chief Execs, but I think particularly this year, what I've asked of ICBs as well. You have got bloody difficult jobs. And the more time I've spent with NHS leaders, listening, learning, and listening to them share with me in quite a candid and open way the sorts of choices and trade-offs they face on a daily basis. They have a huge amount of risk that they're carrying, a huge amount of responsibility, and they are carrying it well. There are always some that are better than others, and there are always different types of leadership challenge. So someone who's a great leader in one job might then encounter a new challenge that actually a different leader would be suitable for. And there's always a bit of that in any context or organisation, but we have really great quality leadership, and it's one of the reasons why, not just in terms of what I've said publicly, but I do want people to know that in private settings, when I'm being hauled over the coals by some of the newspapers about salaries, for example, one of the things that I am always keen to defend leaders on is look at the risk and the responsibility that they're carrying, but also one of the things that's ground my gears once or twice is when I've seen some trust chief execs named and shamed because they're on high salaries, but in organisations that are performing poorly, and often have to pick up the phone to journalists and saying, yeah, that person you've just named and shamed, the reason why they're on a high salary is because they're a great chief exec, and we asked them to go into that organisation only the other month. And now you're kind of like roasting them in the media. So I'm trying to make sure that there is that kind of nuance and understanding. We always have to be conscious that we are custodians and guardians of public money, and things like salaries get scrutinised. That's par for the course. But at the same time, we should be a system, it's the largest public service in the world. We should want the best leaders with the best capability. And when they deliver, we should back them. When they fall short, we should support them. When they're not up to the job, we should support them on to a different future. But overall, I can't tell you, given what we asked people to do this year and where we are at this point in the year, how genuinely proud I am of the way people have responded to the challenge I set them.
But not a job that you want to take.
No, thanks. I've got this one.
Okay.
I'm being asked for all sorts of jobs today. It's not quite the set of questions I thought I'd get when I left this morning.
Let's take a question from a journalist now, Eleanor Hayward of The Times. Where are you?
Oh, I think Ellie's down here.
Oh,
We can't see you up here. It's just like a sea of darkness.
Again.
No.
Do you think Morgan McSweeney is responsible for the toxic culture in Number 10? And do you think he should be fired for briefing against you?
I am not going to add to the toxic culture by contributing to the toxic culture and going after individuals. I don't think that is a constructive or positive thing to do. And one thing I would say for Morgan McSweeney is there wouldn't be a Labour government without him.
Okay, thank you. We've got one more question, and that will be the last one, if you get in very quickly.
Laura Donnelly, I think, was going to ask one.
Okay, let's go to Laura then.
Yeah, Laura Donnelly from the Daily Telegraph. Just wanted to come back to strikes and ask, do you think there's a case for making it illegal now for doctors to strike in the same way that it is for say, the police and for the army?
Well, unsurprisingly, as a Labour politician, that's certainly not my instinct. And, there's a reason why we support people's right to withdraw their labour. I think what I'd say to the BMA is, with that power comes a responsibility and a duty of care to patients. And honestly, I mean, look at the turnout in that latest ballot, and look at the level of mandate they got for it. A majority of resident doctors didn't vote for this strike action. And it's not surprising, really, given they've had a 28.9% pay rise, that since the last round of strike action, I said, well, look, we can create 1,000 more specialty training places right now for the current application round, in addition to the other 1,000 that was earmarked in the 10-year plan for the next few years. We're doubling the number and bringing it forward to right now. I've offered to act on things like exam fees, portfolio fees, to do some backdating on that. I cannot think of a precedent in British trade union history where, after that level of pay rise, people have then chosen to walk out on strike. And I've listened to what they've said in the media, and whether they've got their most reasonable voices out, like Jack Fletcher, or their most unreasonable voices out in the BMA, they are basically saying the same thing, which is, we want more, we want it now, and we're not interested in the choices and trade-offs that you have to contend with as a government. And I just urge them to think about a few things. The first is, I'm responsible for 1.5 million people in the NHS, not just resident doctors, many of whom have not had a pay rise anything like what resident doctors have had, and many of whom, at the height of their career earnings, will never earn as much as the lowest paid doctor. The second thing I'd say is that this strike action causes untold misery and disruptions to patients who could do without it. Thirdly, it is always true, and especially true in winter, it puts untold pressure on other NHS staff who are picking up the pieces for the damage and disruption that resident doctors and the BMA are inflicting on the service. And finally, I think the leadership of the BMA need to really consider whether at this time, with green shoots of recovery, they want to set the system back. Because there isn't a more pro-doctor, pro-NHS health secretary or government waiting in the wings. There is Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. And finally, you look at the state of the public finances and the sorts of choices we're making, especially for the NHS. Let me tell you, when we ask some of the wealthier to pay more, some of the most effective lobbyists against paying higher tax are the BMA Consultants Committee and the BMA Pensions Committee. So what they effectively do is say, we want other people to pay for higher salaries for doctors. And as much as a cancer survivor, I think my surgeon's worth is worth his weight in gold, we have to be honest and realistic about the challenges in the system, the challenges in the public finances and the challenges facing every family in the land. And it's time for the BMA to get real. But one way or another, we're not going to be held to ransom. We are going to plough on regardless. And I think it's become increasingly clear that the BMA is no longer a professional voice for doctors. They are increasingly behaving in cartel-like behaviour, and they threaten not just the recovery of the NHS under this government, they threaten the future of the NHS full stop. And I think that is a morally reprehensible position to be in.
Final question. What lessons have you learned from... What lessons have you learned from previous strikes and negotiations with the resident doctors' strike looming to start on Friday?
I'll say a few things. Firstly, the way in which the team pulls together really is remarkable. And I think on so many fronts, but on this front, Jim Mackey and his team nationally, the team of leaders and frontline staff across the country deserve real credit for the Herculean effort they put in last time, and I know we'll do again. We can keep activity up, we can keep costs down, but ultimately you can mitigate. What you can't do is eliminate the cost, the risk and the disruption. And that's why, as you can tell, I'm mildly frustrated to the point of actually fury about where we are with this round of strikes. Not least because, you know, I think people can probably tell with what I've said publicly, let alone what I've said privately to the Residents' Doctors Committee. I have so much sympathy for the issues they raise in terms of the conditions their members face at work, their desire to improve both their working lives now and conditions, but also their career prospects. So I came into this office really in their corner and wanting to make progress, and I will still make progress for them, but I will do it without the BMA. I will make progress on specialty training places because it's the right thing to do. I will tackle the international medical graduates issue because it's the right thing to do. I will do both of those things without the BMA. I guess my appeal to everyone in this room is a lot of what the BMA and you know, your jobbing resident doctor describes to me in terms of their working conditions. A lot of what they describe are things that actually I don't have any great agency or control over, but lots of you in this room and beyond do. And there are lots of NHS employers who have not helped me and strengthened my arm when it comes to things like hot food provision overnight, the ability to book annual leave, the basic respect, dignity, supervision that resident doctors experience. So my appeal to everyone in this room, to all NHS leaders and employers, is make the 10-point plan that Jim has put together real. Because if resident doctors feel like they're working in an improving NHS, that their concerns are being taken seriously in words, not just in action, that will do an awful lot to generate the goodwill we need to bring an end to strikes. So regardless of the antics of the BMA, let's just keep our eyes on the prize. Let's do the right thing by all our staff at all times, because if there's one thing I've learned this side of the election in this job, leading this service rather than commentating about it or planning to lead it, it's that this is a service with remarkable people. We will only succeed as a team. We need to look out for our team, nurture and cherish our team, because ultimately it will be the team that will be able to look back with pride and say we were the generation that took the NHS, got it back on its feet and made it fit for the future.
Secretary of State, thank you very much.
Thank you.